Most of you who clicked on this video probably feel a little bit lost at some point in the middle game after having gone through the opening. Following all of the principles that you guys have been told, you may just feel unsure about how to proceed. Now, in this video, I'm going to get to the point and let you guys know what you're doing wrong in terms of your opening play, because at the end of the day, middle game plans and ideas stem directly from the opening and how well you know your opening. Now, I'm going to discuss two super important things in this video. First, starting with the tactical underlaying of your opening, which should then flow into your middle game plans and ideas. And secondly, being the positional backing for your opening, which can really help to decide your pawn structures and how you can move your pieces around the structure of your pawns. So, starting off with what I think a lot of people are doing wrong, I'm just going to give like a sample position with, let's say, the white pieces. You've played the Italian, you've just developed your knight and your bishop out, and black has also done the same. Now, this is an extremely common kind of position at the beginner level, and a lot of people might go wrong here with something like knight to c3. And this, for example, would then run into the move knight to a5, which attacks the bishop. And what black is doing here is using their understanding of opening principles to come up with a plan. Now, a plan doesn't have to be some kind of grandmaster, oh, let's think 20 moves ahead. In fact, GMs don't think 20 moves ahead. They often think in short calculation bursts, trying to come up with the best move on every single instance. And in this case, black is simply saying that for the next two moves, I'm going to go and take your bishop because they're aware of the slightly more advanced principle that generally bishops are better than knights, and also the doubling of the white pawn structure could help out black. So obviously white went wrong here, but if you can understand the tactical and positional underlying of the move knight to a5, then you'd be able to come up with the move pawn to c3. And you can see that this is actually a move for move thing. A plan doesn't have to be super long. It can be. I'll give you some examples of some longer plans later on in the video when I'm talking about positional play. But at the moment, we're talking about how the tactical underlying of an opening can really help to guide your chess play and your short-term plans. So in this position, the move pawn to c3 stops the move knight to a5 because now there's the move queen to a4. And in this particular position, let's say the knight moves back, there's even pawn to d4, now attacking the bishop. So this is all tempo for tempo, right? So after captures here, there's even d5, and you would simply lose a knight. And to be honest, material conversions is also a matter for another video in of itself, but at this point, a piece up should be enough to win the game if you were to watch that video as well. But okay, so the move queen to a4 comes as a result of understanding what your opponent wants to do. You see, chess is, of course, a game played by two players, so you have to be very aware of your opponent's plans and ideas, as well as in terms of like their short 1 to 2 move bursts. So you can see how we derived. We want to play the natural developing move. We're told that we should follow the principles, but we have to be aware of our opponent's 1 to 2 move plans, such as attacking and taking the bishop, which can help us come up with the move pawn to c3. Now, you might be asking, oh, well, what do we do in the long run in terms of this position with white? There's still so many pawns on the board. The position is closed. I don't know how to maneuver this one. Now, this is where I'd actually recommend that in terms of opening style, potentially these kind of Italian positions, although very common at the beginner level, is not in fact the best approach, which is why I'm going to move on to my second point here, which is discussing tactical opening choices. So by this, I mean you might want to learn some more gambit style sharp tactical openings. And alternatively, if you're not a fan of that, then I've got some more positional ideas later on in this video. You can skip to it if you think you're that kind of player. I'll have it stamped as in the description. Okay, so pawn to e4. Let's say you're going for an Italian again. Once again, most common opening at the under, I'd say even 1400 level by far. And so after the bishop can either go to c5, maybe you pick up the Evans gambit, right? And after something like knight takes c3 and d4, if you can start learning some sharp variations like castles, with the understanding that, say, black can't play a move like taking on c3 because of the tactical underlying idea, well, it's not with queen d6, with queen to d5, picking up the bishop, and then the pawn and the black king will be in the center. Now, learning how to king hunt is also an idea in of itself, but at the very least, a weak king just makes things a lot harder for black to develop their rook and stuff because they can no longer castle, which is a fairly big concession. So being able to just have the base knowledge and understanding of these little tricky tactics can help you understand that, say, the move is not, you don't have to take back this pawn. You can understand that castling is acceptable. So you have to really combine the principles with these opening tactics and ideas. And once you start to combine the principles with these tactics, as well as observing your opponent's opportunities, then you can become a really, really effective middle game player. And let's say alternatively, they can go knight to f6. I'm just going to give you guys a little taster. You can play a move like pawn to d4, and this is the Scotch gambit. And I think you can have some great success with something like castles. And say after bishop to c5, which is actually a mistake. A lot of players play this. Alternatively, on knight takes e4, I'll show you a little something else. But you can just play e5, and after knight goes out, which is also common, the bishop goes to f4, and h3 comes, the knight gets kicked, and you can use your positional ideas of saying that taking the knight will be very beneficial when your opponent castles, because then the pawns are doubled and the king is weakened. And then in terms of attacking, you can say, okay, I want to bring my knights, but the queen is very important in the attack. So maybe I want to play like knight to h2 and queen to h5, or even bishop to d3. So it's all about spotting the weaknesses in your opponent's camps. You want to create the weaknesses and then exploit the weaknesses. Okay. And alternatively, if your opponent does know a little bit of theory, there's a nice line with knight takes, rook to e1, and pawn to d5. And pawn to d5 might look like a strong move, defending and attacking. But actually, it's not so good because there's bishop takes on d5. You have to notice all of the tactical subtleties in this game. It looks like a free bishop, but after the queen comes out, there's knight to c3, exploiting 2 pins on the queen and the knight. If you take, you drop the queen, and after the queen moves somewhere like a5, knight takes on e4, and this position is very scary for a player with the black pieces who doesn't know what they're doing, hasn't castled the king. Meanwhile, white has very, very clear short-term plans, like developing this bishop to here or here, taking this pawn and moving the queen up and bringing the rooks to the open lanes. Because this is an open position, this is what I was talking about, guys, when you don't probably want to play super locked up positions where all the pawns are on the board like the closed Italian. If you can get like an open Italian with some open files and lanes, it makes putting your pieces on good squares like this rooks in the center much, much easier. Now, as I discussed earlier, as an alternative for a more positionally minded player, I'm suggesting that you might want to pick up a slightly more positional setup, like moves pawn to d4. And let's say after a common response, knight to f6, let's say e6, I don't know, knight c3 and d5. This will probably come by different move orders like d4, d5, but either way, we are entering the queen's gambit declined. I'm just going to skip through a little bit, show like you guys how this Carlsbad structure can be achieved. These moves are not super relevant. Although this does actually show nice tactical underlying again. So you see that both sides have just developed their pieces pretty naturally to the only good squares they can. The knights have tried to come towards the center, and you know the kings have both castled, or the rooks have come to the middle where they can exert the most control for black. But black, notice, is a little bit cramped here. And when you're cramped, if you can understand the positional concept that you want to try and start trading pieces. So that's why black comes up with the tactical move, knight to e4. And once again, the tactics of the bishop tension with this queen-bishop battery on the white bishop is what's leading to this tactic working with the knight moving to the center. Say you were to just take this way, that would, for instance, be a losing move because of bishop takes, and that would drop a piece. So you have to be very, very careful here in the way that you would take this knight. And if you were to take on e7, then there's queen e7, and all of a sudden the two pieces now support the knight in the center, and you can capture it, but that would be no good because also there's a little fork right here. So that's why the best approach is actually bishop takes, and after something like bishop h4, bishop h7, the king moves, let's say you capture this guy and drop the bishop back. Because you don't want to get trapped by g6. Once again, noticing your opponent's plans. g6, tactical move here. That's why bishop d3, you can come up with it. Anyway, we now approach the position that I was talking about, where you can try and formulate a plan. Now, I'm going to explain this pawn structure, and you should try and learn the pawn structure for your opening of choice. But in this specific instance, it's the Carlsbad pawn structure with these two chains pointing either way. Now, even if you're not playing the Carlsbad pawn structure, there's another very important principle that I would like you guys to take away. And that is that you should try to play in the direction of your pawn chain. Now, what I mean by this is that for black wants to play in this direction where their pawn chain is pointing. So they want to start a kingside attack with their bishop, their knight, maybe even a little rook lift with something like the rook coming into a kingside attack. And black's going to hope that the kingside counterplay is good enough to offset white's plan, which is a minority attack, because white wants to try and push this b pawn and then create a weakness on c6. Now, this is all about trying to introduce problems into your opponent's camp. Let's say you play pawn to b4. Black wants to start operations on the king side, and you play pawn to b5. Now, alternatively, if black tries to play a6 and says, ha, I'm stopping your plan, no, you're not, pawn to a4 and b5 comes anyway. So, b5 happens. And now all of a sudden, what's going on? If you take this way, then you have an isolated d pawn, and white has new plans to try and remaneuver their pieces to attack this weak d pawn, as well as clearly collecting this guy with an immediate threat of these two pieces. I spot that because I'm just aware of the patterns of the fork. So once again, puzzles over everything, guys. You need to understand the tactical underlying of your openings. You can be as good of a positional player as you want, but if you can't get these 1 to 2 move tactics, the plans are not going to work. You can come up with a good plan, but if you hang a piece, you're still going to lose, okay? So, obviously, black doesn't want to create this d pawn weakness. Let's say black tries to hold on. Boom, you capture. If black captures with the bishop, the d pawn is still a weakness. If you capture with the b pawn, then the c pawn is a weakness. And you've got all kinds of ideas, like you can claim the open b file, for example. You can play knight to a4 to c5. You can play knight to e2 to f4. All these ideas are about trying to pressure this c pawn or this knight a4, knight c5, trying to take advantage of the fact that there are no black pawns that can kick you away. So in summary, what I'm trying to say, guys, is that you need to take observations regularly about the position. What's changed? In this position, if the knight were to go to c5, there would be a b pawn that can kick it away, so it wouldn't be as strong, right? So, but in the resulting position, there's no more b pawn to kick the knight, so the knight is very safe in this outpost, and that's a nice little 2-move plan you can come up with. Additionally, the b file was closed, now it's open, let's occupy it. So when there's not many open files, you can easily make a little mini plan of just trying to control the file, right? When there's a weakness that you can spot, this weak c pawn, you can easily start to come up with a plan. Let's blockade the pawn, stop it from being traded off, and try and keep it as a weakness to attack with my pieces in the endgame. if I could get this bishop to a4, maybe that could be very good. I'm not sure how you're going to do that yet. Maybe bishop c2, bishop a4, right? So anyway, all I'm trying to say, guys, is that coming up with a plan is not nearly as daunting as it may seem. You guys can all do it. Trust me on that. You just have to make the right observations and be sure to analyze your games, to try and see the tactics that the engine will suggest afterwards, because there will be blunders, there will be missed wins. But as you start to observe and remember them, then that will really help understanding what your opponent wants, and therefore knowing how best to respond and pose problems. Now, I hope you guys did enjoy this video and find it informative. If you did, please do consider liking and subscribing. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.